The galaxy had once been peaceful, a tapestry of civilizations coexisting, their differences swept aside by the technological marvels and diplomatic treaties that united them. Then came the Raxi, a race of cold, calculating conquerors from the far reaches of the cosmos. The Raxi were masters of subjugation. They swept through planets, leaving devastation in their wake. No species had been able to stop them. Until now, the United Earth Fleet had suffered a staggering defeat at the hands of the Raxi at the Battle of Zentar. 100 warships lay shattered, and thousands of soldiers, diplomats, and scientists had been lost. The Earth had hoped for help from their allies, other galactic powers. But the Raxi's might was too overwhelming. Humanity was alone. Among the remnants of Earth's once mighty fleet, Commander Jonah Rivers stood before the cold steel of the command center aboard the Titan, Earth's last warship, its defenses severely weakened, its engines barely functional. The war was lost, and everyone knew it. But Jonah hadn't given up hope. Not yet. "You're saying this is our only chance." Jonah's voice was rough, the weight of exhaustion dragging his words down like lead. Dr. Maria Vasquez, Earth's lead scientist and the last surviving member of the Alliance of Stellar Physicists, nodded gravely. Her face was pale from lack of sleep, her eyes bloodshot from the hours spent in the war room. "Yes, Commander. The Vraxi have a vulnerability, something they never expected us to discover. I've been working on it for months, but it requires a precise operation." Jonah's gaze sharpened. He already knew what Maria was implying. One human, one mission, one shot. If he failed, the galaxy would fall, and Earth would be nothing more than a forgotten memory. Maria handed Jonah a datapad, and he scanned the schematic of the Vraxi's flagship, the Imperium, towering over the battlefield like a monolith of death. The Imperium was more than just a warship. It was a fortress, a city-sized command center, and the hub of their entire empire. Its shields were impenetrable, its weapons capable of wiping out fleets with a single blow. But Maria had discovered its weakness. Hidden deep within the vessel, buried beneath layers of armor and weaponry, was a single energy core that powered the entire fleet. If that core could be destroyed, the Imperium would be neutralized. And with it, the Vraxi's empire would crumble. The problem, however, was getting close enough to strike. "I can't do this alone," Jonah said, handing the data pad back to her. "I'm not some hero." Maria's lips quirked in a sad smile. "You don't have to be. You just have to be human." The words stung, but Jonah knew they were true. The Vraxi had underestimated humanity in every way. They saw them as weak, disorganized, a primitive species ripe for conquest. What the Vraxi didn't understand, however, was the unyielding spirit of humankind, the ability to adapt, to fight, to survive against impossible odds. "We have one shot," Maria continued, her voice steady. "We've set up a decoy fleet, one last assault to draw the Vraxi's attention. During the battle, we can slip a small team aboard their flagship. I'll give you everything you need. But once you're in there, it's up to you." Jonah nodded. "I'll make it happen. But there's no backup if things go wrong." Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're our last hope, Jonah. Don't let them forget what humanity is capable of." As he turned to leave, Jonah glanced at the massive window in the command center. Through the transparent glass, the stars of the galaxy glimmered, a silent reminder of what was at stake. But Jonah knew what was expected of him. He had always been a soldier, but this would be different. This wasn't just about victory or defeat. This was about survival. The survival of an entire species. With one last deep breath, Jonah made his way to the hangar bay. His mission was clear: board the Imperium, destroy the core, and bring down the Raxi. If he failed, it wasn't just Earth that would fall, it would be the end of all sentient life. But for now, he allowed himself to focus on the task ahead. There would be no second chances. Jonah's boots thudded against the cold metal floors of the hangar as he made his way toward the transport ship that would carry him on his deadly mission. The crew members in the hangar barely spared him a glance, their faces hollow with the weariness of a war that had dragged on for far too long. The Titan was no longer the imposing force it had once been. Its hull was scarred, its systems barely functional. Yet, for all its flaws, it was still humanity's last hope. His personal shuttle, the Chimera, sat at the far end of the hangar. The small craft was designed for stealth, fast, silent, and capable of slipping through enemy lines without drawing attention. Jonah's heart beat a little faster at the sight of it. This wasn't just a ship. This was his lifeline. As he climbed aboard, he was met by his small team. There was Lieutenant Zarakol, a skilled pilot with nerves of steel, who would guide them through the heart of enemy space. Sergeant Mark Iron Daniels, a burly soldier with a reputation for taking down anything that moved. And Dr. Maria Vasquez herself, who, despite her scientific background, had insisted on accompanying them as a field operative. "I still don't get why you're coming along, Maria," Jonah said, securing himself in his seat. The shuttle's interior was tight, the atmosphere heavy with tension. Maria buckled in across from him, her eyes focused on the console in front of her. "Because, Commander, I'm the one who understands the Imperium inside and out. I designed the algorithm that will allow us to bypass the flagship's defenses." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "You're not a soldier." "No," Maria replied softly, her eyes narrowing with determination. "But I'm something better. I'm the only one who can get you to the core." Jonah exhaled sharply, the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders like 1,000 tons. The rest of his team remained silent, each one caught in their own thoughts. They knew the risks. None of them expected to return from this. Lieutenant Cole's voice crackled over the comms, snapping Jonah from his reverie. "We're ready to launch, Commander. Time to make history." Jonah nodded, his throat tight. "Let's do it." The Chimera shook as it was detached from the Titan, the last bastion of humanity's fleet, and began its descent into enemy territory. The stars outside the viewing port stretched into elongated streaks as the shuttle engaged its FTL drive, slingshotting them across the vast distances of space in an instant. They were headed directly for the Vraxis flagship, the Imperium, and they would have only one chance to get in undetected. Minutes later, the shuttle dropped out of FTL, the stars returning to their usual pinprick size in the endless expanse of space. Jonah's breath hitched as the massive shape of the Imperium loomed before them, its dark, angular form resembling an insectoid predator lying in wait. The flagship was surrounded by dozens of Vraxi patrol ships, their sleek designs armed to the teeth and constantly scanning for intruders. Jonah turned to Maria, whose fingers flew over the controls, entering complex commands that would initiate their entry into the Vraxi fleet's blind spot. "We can't slip through their defenses, Maria. This isn't some covert mission. This is a suicide run." Maria didn't look up, but her voice was steady. "It's not a suicide run if we do it right. I've calculated their patrol routes. We'll pass undetected, but we have a very narrow window. If we don't enter the Imperium within the next 12 minutes, we'll be spotted." Jonah nodded grimly, his gaze fixed on the mammoth ship ahead. He knew Maria was right. This was their only shot. Their timing had to be perfect. As they approached the Vraxi ship, the tension in the shuttle's small interior was palpable. Jonah's fingers clenched the armrests, his jaw tight with concentration. They were getting closer. Every moment counted. Lieutenant Cole's voice cut through the silence again, sharp and focused. "Approaching Vraxi defenses. I'm bringing us into position now. You'll have to hold your nerve. They'll be watching closely for anomalies." Jonah glanced at his team. Daniels was already preparing his weapons, his knuckles white as he gripped his assault rifle. Zara's fingers danced over the shuttle's controls, guiding them silently toward the target. Maria spoke up just before they crossed the threshold. "Remember, once we're in, it's a countdown. You've got less than 2 hours to destroy the core and get out before the entire ship goes into lockdown. If you don't reach the core in time." Jonah finished her sentence. "We die." A heavy silence fell. Then, in a tone that left no room for doubt, Jonah spoke again. "Let's make sure that doesn't happen." The shuttle's engines hummed softly as they glided into the heart of the Vraxi flagship. The Chimera passed through the shimmering outer shields of the Imperium with barely a whisper, its cloaking system fully engaged. Jonah couldn't help but hold his breath as the massive, insectoid ship loomed around them, its jagged spires and endless corridors of steel creating a maze that no human should have been able to navigate. Yet, here they were, moving inside the belly of the beast. Maria's hands flew over the interface, her concentration palpable. "We're in," she muttered under her breath, barely audible over the hum of the shuttle. "Initiating silent mode now. Zara, keep us invisible. Every patrol ship is within our range. If they get a whiff of us—" "I know," Lieutenant Cole replied tersely, her hands moving with practiced precision on the controls. "We won't survive the first shot. Trust me, I've got this." Jonah swallowed hard, his thoughts focused on the mission. The first step was getting to the core, deep within the ship, in a location only Maria knew, buried beneath layers of Raxi security. The second step was getting out. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in practice. The shuttle glided silently through the massive hangar of the Imperium, where hundreds of Raxi ships were stored. The hangar bay was eerily quiet, the hum of distant machinery the only sound. Jonah's eyes flicked to the digital map Maria had transmitted to his console. Every red that marked a Vraxi patrol or sentry, their routes carefully tracked by Maria's algorithm. "Look alive," Jonah said quietly, his voice a low growl. "We're in the lion's den now." Sergeant Daniels, who had been silent up until now, muttered a curse under his breath. "I don't like this. Something's off. This place feels wrong." Jonah nodded. "We can't afford distractions. Focus on the mission." "Agreed," Maria said, her voice firm as she activated another series of commands to lock out the ship's main security systems. "I'm disabling the internal sensors now. The next 20 minutes are critical. After that, we'll be on our own." The shuttle eased through a massive security door that led into a dark, dimly lit corridor. Jonah could feel the tension in the air, thick and almost suffocating. The Imperium wasn't built to accommodate human intruders. It was an empire in itself, a moving fortress, and to be here in the heart of it felt like a violation of nature. They were not supposed to be here, but they were. "We're almost there," Maria said, glancing up at Jonah. "The core is located 2 decks below us, just beneath the central command chamber. But there's a problem." Jonah's eyes narrowed. "What kind of problem?" "The core is heavily guarded. And there's a secondary issue," Maria continued, her voice tight with concern. "The Imperium is rigged with a self-destruct sequence. If we're caught in the act of sabotage, the core will initiate a lockdown and the entire ship will go into alert mode. We need to disable that protocol first." Jonah's heart skipped a beat. "How long will that take?" Maria grimaced. "Too long. We need to get to the core before the self-destruct protocol is activated. I've designed a backdoor into the system, but once we're inside, it's all about speed." "Let's move, then." Jonah's voice was cold, every muscle in his body taut with anticipation. Time was running out. The shuttle's door hissed open, and Jonah led his team into the dim corridor. The floor was cold beneath his boots, the metal slick and smooth like the inside of a tomb. The silence was broken only by the sound of their boots and the occasional faint hum of distant machinery. Jonah gestured for his team to follow, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his sidearm. Maria moved ahead, navigating the corridor with an ease that belied the gravity of the situation. She had spent weeks studying the layout of the ship, memorizing every schematic, every blueprint, every possible detail. But no matter how much planning had gone into this, they were still intruders in the heart of a living, breathing fortress. "We're near the first checkpoint," Maria said in a hushed tone. "I've identified a patrol ahead. You'll need to take them out quietly." Jonah gave a curt nod to Daniels, who nodded back, already moving into position. The team crouched low, melting into the shadows. They had no choice but to be silent, to move like ghosts. One mistake, one sound too loud, and they would be swarmed by the Vraxi security. From around the corner, 3 Vraxi soldiers appeared. They were humanoid, but their alien physiology, tall, lanky, with elongated limbs and gleaming black exoskeletons, was enough to make them appear otherworldly. Their bodies shimmered faintly under the dim lights, the chittering sound of their mandibles the only indication that they were aware of their surroundings. Daniels moved like a shadow, his rifle held low, his movements precise. He fired a silent dart that hit one of the Vraxi in the back of the neck, and within seconds the creature collapsed without a sound. The other two soldiers reacted swiftly, reaching for their weapons, but Daniels was faster. Another dart, and then another, and the remaining Vraxi fell silent, their bodies crumpling to the floor. Jonah held his breath as Daniels checked the bodies. Satisfied, he waved the team forward. They couldn't afford to linger. "We're in the clear," Jonah whispered. "Move." The team continued down the dark corridors, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the Imperium. Jonah's mind raced, each thought focused on the mission. They were closer to the core, but with every step, the odds of survival seemed to dwindle. The Vraxi weren't stupid. They would know something was wrong soon enough. And when that happened, Jonah didn't know if any of them would make it out alive. The deeper they ventured into the Imperium, the more Jonah could feel the walls closing in. The ship was alive. Every hallway, every vent, every flicker of dim light seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if the Imperium itself was aware of their intrusion. The ship's vastness had begun to feel like a living organism, its halls like veins that carried the lifeblood of the Vraxi Empire. And somewhere, buried deep within, was the heart of that empire, the core. Jonah pushed the unsettling thought aside. Focus. That was the only thing that mattered now. He led his team down another twisting corridor, the hum of the ship vibrating beneath their feet. Maria was in the lead, navigating with the precision of someone who had studied this layout more times than she cared to admit. "We're 2 levels down from the core," Maria whispered, glancing at the digital map on her wristpad. "Another 3 corridors, and we should reach the access point. Once we're in, there's no turning back." Jonah nodded, tightening his grip on his sidearm. The corridors grew narrower, the air thicker. Every sound felt amplified in the silence of the Imperium, and the unnatural stillness made his skin crawl. He was hyper-aware now, his senses on edge, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. Suddenly, Zara's voice broke the silence. "I'm picking up a Vraxi patrol, directly ahead. At least 3 soldiers, maybe more." Jonah cursed under his breath. "How far?" 200 meters, Zara replied. "And they're moving fast. We'll have to take them out before they get to us, or we'll be caught in the open." Jonah's heart rate quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. The last thing they needed now was panic. "Daniels, you're up." Daniels moved without hesitation, his bulky frame blending into the shadows. With a signal from Jonah, he moved forward, his footsteps silent on the cold metal floors. The rest of the team followed, staying close to the walls, ready for whatever would come. A few moments later, they reached a junction in the corridor. Jonah crouched low, peeking around the corner to spot the incoming patrol. The Vraxi soldiers marched with an eerie rhythm, their long limbs moving in unison. Their helmets, reflecting the dim light of the ship, gave them a haunting, insect-like appearance. Jonah held his breath as Daniels positioned himself in the shadows. His rifle was ready, its silencing system primed. The seconds seemed to stretch into infinity. Then, with lethal precision, Daniels moved. His dart flew through the air, striking one of the Vraxi soldiers in the neck. The creature crumpled to the floor without a sound. The other 2 soldiers turned, startled but too slow to react. Another dart, and then another. Within seconds, both were down, their bodies hitting the cold metal with a dull thud. "Clear," Daniels muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his face tense but focused. Jonah nodded in approval. "Keep moving. We're almost there." The team pressed forward, moving quickly but carefully. The closer they got to the core, the more the ship seemed to resist them, as if the Imperium itself was aware of their intrusion. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer, as though the ship was preparing for something. Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Maria's voice broke through his thoughts. "We're getting close. The access point should be right ahead." I'll need a minute to override the security, but once we're in, we'll be in the heart of the ship. No more cover. Jonah's stomach churned. No turning back. She didn't respond, but her determined look said it all. They had no choice now. Failure meant the end of humanity. The team reached the final junction. Ahead, the corridor split. One path leading to a set of massive doors adorned with intricate alien symbols, marking the entrance to the heart of the Imperium. The air here was thick, the atmosphere charged with energy. Jonah could feel the pulse of the ship vibrating beneath his boots, and the weight of the mission seemed to bear down on him with each passing second. Zara turned to Jonah, her voice low. They've got to be expecting us by now. We've been inside for too long. Jonah clenched his jaw. We're not out yet. Keep your head. Maria stepped forward, already accessing the security panel next to the door. Her fingers flew over the controls, typing in a rapid series of codes. Jonah kept a sharp eye on the hallway behind them, but the shadows remained still, almost too still. Come on, Maria muttered, her face tense. Just a few more seconds. The door's massive locks clicked open, and the team flooded through into a large, open chamber. It was unlike anything Jonah had ever seen, dark, metallic, and imposing. The walls were lined with pipes and cables, all leading to a central platform where the core pulsed with a faint blue light. Jonah's heart hammered in his chest as they moved closer. But just as they stepped forward, an alarm blared to life, echoing through the entire ship. Alert! Security breach in Sector 34. Intruders detected. Initiating lockdown. Jonah's blood ran cold. Move now, he shouted. They rushed forward, but the door they had entered through slammed shut, sealing them inside the chamber. The countdown had begun. Maria. Jonah shouted over the roar of the alarm. Disarm the core. Now. Maria rushed to the central console, her eyes wide with panic. I can't. The lockdown has already initiated the self-destruct sequence. We have only 15 minutes. The cold realization hit Jonah like a punch to the gut. There was no time left. The countdown was on, and failure wasn't an option. Daniels, cover us. Jonah barked. Zara, help Maria. We get this done, or we die trying. As the clock ticked down, Jonah's mind raced. They had one chance, no more, no less. And if they didn't get the core disabled in time, the Imperium would take them all down with it. You said. The chamber around Jonah trembled as the Imperium's self-destruct sequence continued to hum, a terrifying reminder that their time was rapidly running out. The clock on Maria's wrist pad blinked with a relentless countdown. 14:32. They had less than 15 minutes to disable the core and get out. Failure wasn't an option, not when the stakes were so high. Maria, talk to me, Jonah said, his voice tight with urgency. His eyes darted to the flickering consoles, watching her frantic movements. What's the status? Maria's fingers danced across the panel, her expression a mix of concentration and fear. The self-destruct protocol is tied directly into the core's security systems. I've bypassed part of the lock, but I need another minute to fully override the core's fail-safes. She paused, her face pale. If I don't complete it in time, the entire ship will go into a lockdown and detonate. No escape. Jonah cursed under his breath. They were running on borrowed time, and the seconds felt like they were slipping away faster than he could process. We don't have that long. We're at 13:45 now. His gaze shifted to the large, pulsing blue core in the center of the chamber. It loomed like a sentient thing, thrumming with energy, as if the Imperium itself was alive and fully aware of their presence. Sergeant Daniels had positioned himself by one of the nearby consoles, his rifle aimed toward the doorway. The chamber, though massive, felt smaller now, the walls pressing in as the minutes ticked down. We've got movement, he reported quietly, his voice steady despite the impending chaos. I'm hearing heavy footfalls outside. Vraxi patrols. They're coming this way. Jonah's pulse quickened. How many? 3, maybe more, Daniels replied, his voice low but firm. We'll have company soon. Zara, Jonah said, his voice sharp. Get to the door and hold them off. Zara nodded, her eyes steely with determination as she positioned herself by the door. Got it. Don't take too long, Maria. Maria's hands flew over the console, her brow furrowed as she fought to break through the security protocols. 1310. Jonah's gaze remained fixed on the door, every sense alert. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, a storm of impending danger swirling around them. The Vraxi wouldn't take this breach lightly. The ship was about to go into full lockdown, and they were already inside. No way to escape without completing their mission. But Jonah wasn't about to let it end here. Not like this. 12:30. The countdown was relentless. Every second was another reminder that they were on borrowed time. Jonah gripped his rifle tighter, muscles coiled and ready to strike. "Status, Maria," he demanded, turning back toward her. "I'm close," she said, her voice barely audible. "Just give me a few more seconds. I can do this." Zara, now stationed by the door, peered through the narrow slit between the doorframe and the wall. Her eyes narrowed. "They're here. I see them." 2 Vraxi, armed and moving fast. Jonah's blood ran cold. It was too soon. They were too early. "Take them out, Zara. We need more time." Zara didn't hesitate. She dropped into a crouch, her sniper rifle at the ready. She exhaled slowly, then fired. The first Vraxi crumpled. A dart lodged in its neck before it even had time to react. The second spun around, a shrill screech escaping its mandibles as it reached for its weapon. Zara was already on it, a second shot echoing in the chamber, and the second soldier fell silent, its body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The door slid open abruptly, and a third Vraxi, larger and more armored than the others, stormed in. It let out an alien roar, its weapon raised and firing a barrage of plasma shots toward the team. "Get down," Jonah shouted, pulling Maria to the floor with him as plasma streaked overhead, searing the air. Daniels returned fire, his shots precise and forceful, but the Vraxi soldier was tough, its thick armor absorbing much of the impact. Zara's voice rang out again, this time with urgency. "I can't get another shot. He's too close." Jonah's eyes narrowed as he calculated the moment. Without thinking, he lunged forward, shoulder-checking Maria to the side as he raced toward the Vraxi soldier, his rifle raised. The alien's weapon fired again, but Jonah was faster. He ducked under the line of fire and in one fluid motion, drove his knife into the exposed joint of the Vraxi's armor, the blade sinking deep. The creature howled, its limbs jerking as Jonah twisted the knife, cutting through its vital circuitry. The Vraxi dropped to the floor with a final agonizing screech, collapsing into a heap of smoldering metal and alien flesh. Jonah stood over the fallen soldier, his breath heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. The countdown continued, indifferent to the violence that had just unfolded. He turned back to Maria. "Status." She was still at the console, sweat dripping from her face as she fought to break the last of the security locks. Her hands shook, but her eyes remained focused. 8:40. "I've almost got it," Maria replied, voice tight. "Just a little more time." Jonah checked his watch. 8:30. Zara, Daniels, cover the door. "We're not done yet." The air around them grew thick, the sound of distant footsteps growing louder. They weren't alone. "We've got a small window," Jonah said. "Stay sharp." Zara and Daniels moved quickly into position, readying their weapons. Jonah's mind raced. They couldn't afford another fight. Not now. Not when they were so close. 7:50. Maria's fingers flew across the interface, and then, suddenly, the screen flashed green. "I've got it," Maria shouted, a small laugh escaping her as her tension broke. "The self-destruct sequence is disabled. We have access to the core." Jonah exhaled in relief, but the moment didn't last. The ship was still on alert, and they were still trapped. The core was vulnerable, but it wasn't over yet. "Let's finish this," Jonah said, moving toward the center of the room. The countdown wasn't done, but they had just taken the first step toward survival. With no time to waste, Jonah took a deep breath and activated the core's override. It was now or never. The Imperium groaned around them as Jonah approached the central core. The energy pulsed in eerie waves, sending ripples through the air as though the ship itself was alive, wounded, but alive. Every second felt like an eternity. The countdown clock blinked relentlessly. 7:12. Jonah felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. They were so close, but the stakes were higher than ever. One wrong move, and everything they had fought for, everything humanity had fought for, would be reduced to nothing but space debris. He couldn't let that happen. "Maria, how long until the core is completely disabled?" Jonah asked, his voice steady despite the pressure. Maria stood over the control panel, her fingers moving like a blur across the interface. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead, but there was no hesitation in her movements. "I've isolated the main control algorithms. It's just a matter of time now. I just need to make sure I don't trigger the lockdown by accident. The core systems are deeply ingrained in the ship's central AI, but if I screw up now, we won't be able to access the ship's main systems at all." Jonah looked at her, his stomach twisting. Every second was precious. They needed to get out, and fast. "Focus, Maria," he said, more quietly than before. "You're doing fine. We just need a few more minutes." Maria didn't look up, but Jonah could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting the ship's AI. She was fighting herself, struggling to stay composed under the weight of everything on her shoulders. Zara and Daniels had moved to the far side of the chamber, their eyes scanning the entrance. They knew they couldn't afford another surprise. Jonah's mind raced as he looked back at the doors, now sealed shut, and the empty, sterile hallway beyond. They had taken out the patrols, but they knew the Vraxi were not so easily fooled. The enemy would regroup. They would come for them. It was only a matter of time. "We don't have much longer," Daniels muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "They're going to send reinforcements soon." Zara didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the corridor outside, her sniper rifle trained on the doorway. Her focus was razor-sharp. Jonah could see the quiet tension in her body, every muscle wound tight, preparing for the worst. Boom! The first shot reverberated through the ship, followed by a series of loud clangs as Vraxi boots echoed down the corridor. Reinforcements had arrived. "They're here," Zara growled, her grip tightening on her rifle. A whole squad coming fast. Jonah looked at the countdown. 4:35. He didn't need to say anything. Zara and Daniel sprang into action, positioning themselves behind pillars and crates, ready to cover the team's retreat. Their survival depended on getting the core disabled and escaping before the ship's full security lockdown activated. The Vraxi were relentless. They wouldn't stop until they eradicated every last intruder. "Maria, we're almost out of time," Jonah said, urgency creeping into his voice. "You've got to wrap it up. Now." Maria's eyes flickered up to meet his. She could feel the weight of his words. She could feel the weight of the entire mission. "I'm almost there," she replied, voice tight. "Just a little more time." "It's complicated, Jonah. The security layers are designed to prevent direct sabotage." He moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance. "I know. But you've got this. You've done the impossible already." Maria nodded, her hands flying over the controls with renewed urgency. The seconds bled away. 3:00. Jonah glanced at his watch and then to Zara, signaling her to prepare for a full firefight. They had no choice now. If Maria couldn't finish her override, the ship would lock down, and they'd be trapped. Suddenly, Maria let out a sharp gasp. "I've done it. The core is disarmed. I've disabled the self-destruct, and we have full access to the ship's systems." Jonah exhaled in relief, but there was no time to relax. They still had to get out, and fast. The moment Maria hit the final key, the lights in the chamber flickered, and a heavy hum filled the air. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the ship holding its breath. Then, without warning, the entire chamber shook violently, the walls rattling as if the Imperium itself was trying to expel them from its guts. "It's a shutdown," Maria shouted, eyes wide with panic. "The Imperium is entering a defensive mode. We need to leave now, before it locks down everything." Jonah's heart dropped. They hadn't disabled the entire ship, they had only disrupted a fraction of its systems, and now it was fighting back with everything it had. The door to the core room slid open with a loud hiss, and Jonah motioned for his team to move. "Let's go," he ordered. "We've got to reach the shuttle, now." Zara and Daniels moved quickly, their weapons trained on the entrance, as they swept the corridor. Jonah and Maria were close behind. They ran, their footsteps echoing off the cold metal floors, the sound of pursuit close on their heels. The further they went, the more the Imperium seemed to fight them. Doors slamming shut, security systems coming online, and the ominous sound of Raxi soldiers closing in on all sides. "Almost there," Jonah shouted, pushing himself harder. His lungs burned, but he forced himself to ignore the pain. The shuttle bay was only a few hundred meters away now. They could make it, but the Imperium's defenses were coming online faster than they could outrun them. Suddenly, Zara's voice rang out in the comms. "Vraxi reinforcements coming from the left. We've got a full squad ahead." Jonah didn't hesitate. "Daniels, cover our 6. He turned to Maria. "Keep moving. Get to the shuttle. I'll hold them off." Zara, Daniels, and Jonah turned to face the incoming Vraxi soldiers, their weapons ready. The Vraxi's war cries filled the air, the battle for survival now fully underway. Maria didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the shuttle, praying that Jonah and the others could keep the Vraxi at bay long enough for her to reach the escape. The countdown had been disabled, but they weren't out of danger yet. The Imperium would fight them to the end. The only question was, would they make it out alive? Jonah's grip tightened on his rifle as the Vraxi closed in. They weren't done yet, not until every last one of them had escaped, or the ship had claimed them all. And Jonah would see to it that it was the former.